The chains made a noise Dalton would always remember when they fell to the dirt. Not the loud metal bang he thought it'd be, but something softer, like relief was talking out loud. The sun was just coming up over the flat land, making everything look like old blood, and the woman whose hands he just set free stared at him with eyes that showed no thanks, only anger. Her words came quiet and mean, each one like a knife. "I'd rather die than be yours." She said it like she really meant it, like a bad wish, like she felt every bit. And right then, with her still breathing hard and his hand still shaking from cutting the metal, Dalton Crane knew he'd done something awful, not in setting her free, but in thinking he could give her freedom. The sun got higher, not caring about the bad feeling between them. Dalton stood there with the cutters still in his hand, watching her rub her wrists where the iron had hurt her. Dark marks on darker skin. She didn't thank him. Didn't even say anything about what he'd done except that first mean no. "You're hurt," he said, because he didn't know what else to say. She looked at him like he'd said something dumb and rude. "You should leave," but he couldn't. Not yet. The camp around them showed a story he was still figuring out. 3 sleeping bags still warm when he'd got there. Stuff thrown around like whoever was here ran off fast. A cooking fire that had gone out hours ago, and her tied with chains to a post stuck deep in the hard dirt. "Who did this to you?" Kiona didn't answer. She was already moving, checking her legs, moving her shoulders. There was something in the way she moved that made him think about his own body next to hers. Careful, on purpose, like a way of talking he'd forgotten. "I can help you get back to your people." That made her stop. She turned and for the first time really looked at him. Not through him or past him, but at him. Her eyes went from his old hat to the bullet belt on his hips, staying there just long enough to make something feel tight in his chest. "Your people already helped me once," she said. "That's how I ended up in chains." The words hit like blames. Dalton felt them sit in his belly, heavy and bad. He wanted to say he wasn't like that he was different, that she could trust him. But she was already walking away, going east toward the rising sun with nothing but the clothes she had and anger to keep her warm. He watched her go, told himself to let her. She'd made her choice clear, but then she tripped just a bit. A little stop in her walk that she tried to hide, tried to keep going. Her hand went to her side, and he saw the dark spot there getting bigger slowly across the leather of her dress. She was bleeding, and she was walking away from the only water for miles. Dalton looked down at the chains on the ground, at the blood on the metal where it had cut into her skin, looked at the empty camp and the footprints going away from it, deep and scared in the dust. Whatever had happened here wasn't done, and neither was she. He picked up his water bottle and started walking. Not after her, not yet. Just in the same direction, keeping his distance. Watching the way the morning light shone in her hair and the way she held herself like a knife even when she was hurting. She looked back once. Her face told him everything he needed to know. This was going to be a long day. The space between them stayed exactly the same. 30 steps, no more, no less. Dalton kept it that way on purpose, like there was an invisible string tying them that neither could cut. She didn't look back again, but he knew she knew he was there. The way her shoulders stayed stiff. The way her walk never changed even with the limp she was trying to hide. The sun was biting now. It hurt bare skin and made the air thick enough to bite. He'd been walking in desert land long enough to know the signs of someone pushing too hard. The little sway in her walk. The way she'd stopped sweating, which was worse than still sweating. "You need water," he called out. She didn't answer. Didn't even slow down. Dalton took off his water bottle and walked faster. Not running, that would scare her. Just getting closer with the kind of steady way that said he wasn't leaving. When he got within 10 steps, she turned fast on him. Her hand went to her side to a knife he hadn't seen before. "Bone handle smooth from use?" "Stop," she said. He stopped, held up the water bottle where she could see it. "Just water, nothing else. I don't want anything from you." Want and need aren't the same thing. Something went across her face then. Not thanks. Something sharper and more mixed up. She looked at the water bottle like it was a trick, which maybe it was. Maybe every nice thing from a stranger was a trick in its own way. "Drink," he said, and threw it to her. She caught it with one hand, fast as a snake bite. For a moment, she just held it, thinking about choices he couldn't see. Then she opened it and drank. The way she drank made something move in Dalton's chest. There was nothing soft about it. She tilted her head back and let the water go, some of it running down her throat and across her neck. Needy and pretty and so full of life it hurt to watch. When she finally lowered the water bottle, she was breathing hard. Water drops caught the light on her skin. "Enjoyed the show?" she asked, and there was a dare in her voice like she'd caught him looking, which he had been. "I was making sure you didn't drink it all." Liar. She threw the water bottle back. He caught it, felt the warmth where her hands had been. "You're still bleeding," he said, pointing toward her side. "I've bled before. That wound needs cleaning, or it'll get bad. Then I'll get bad." The stubborn way in her voice would have been funny if it wasn't so likely to kill her. Dalton looked at the endless nothing around them. No shade for miles. No water except what he carried. The nearest town was 2 days' ride, and she was on foot. "Where exactly are you planning to go? Away from you." "That's not a direction. It's the only one that matters." She started walking again, slower this time. The limp was more clear now. She was using the knife like a stick, leaning on it every few steps when she thought he wasn't looking. Dalton followed. What else could he do? The sun kept going up. Heat waved off the ground in ways that made the far line look like water. Kiona's steps got shorter, her breathing rougher. Once she swayed so hard he thought she'd fall, but she caught herself. Stubborn didn't begin to cover it. They walked like that for another hour, him following her, refusing to know he was there. The space between them filled with things neither could say. Then she stopped, just stopped walking and stood there, head down, shoulders moving. Dalton waited, didn't move closer, didn't speak. When she finally looked back at him, there was something open in her face. Not giving up, but maybe knowing that pride had limits even she couldn't go past. "There's shade," she said, pointing to a bunch of rocks far away. "We can stop there, not asking, not quite telling. Something between." Dalton nodded. They turned toward the rocks together, still 30 steps apart, still going around each other like wolves, trying to decide if they were friends or food, but moving in the same direction now. That had to count for something. The shade was barely enough for one person, let alone two, a narrow space between two big rocks that leaned against each other like drunks holding each other up. But it was shade, and out here that made it worth more than gold. Kiona got there first and pushed herself against the coolest part of the stone. Her eyes closed. Relief showed on her face before she could hide it behind that wall of no she kept between them. Dalton stopped at the edge of the shadow. There wasn't room for both of them unless they sat close. Too close. "I'll wait out here," he said. She opened one eye. "That's dumb." "Seems nice. Nice gets you sick from heat." She moved a bit, making space. That wasn't really space at all. Sit. It wasn't an ask, more like a real fact that they both needed to live the next few hours and dead men weren't useful to anyone. Dalton sat in the narrow space, his shoulder pushed against hers. She didn't move away, but he felt her get stiff at the touch. Every muscle in her body went tight as wire. The heat outside was a living thing, pushing down on the world with weight that made breathing hard. Inside their small spot, the air was still and close and filled with the smell of dirt and sweat and something else. Something that made Dalton more aware of where his arm touched hers than he wanted to be. "How far to your people?" he asked, because the quiet was becoming its own kind of push. "Far enough that you can't follow." "I'm not trying to follow." "Then why are you still here?" It was a fair question. He didn't have a good answer. The right thing would be to leave her the water bottle and ride away. Let her make her own choices, her own mistakes. But the blood on her side said those mistakes might be deadly, and he'd seen enough death to last several lives. "The men who chained you," he said instead of answering. "How many were there?" Kiona was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had edges he hadn't heard before. Three sellers moving through Apache land where they shouldn't have been. They saw me getting water alone. She stopped. They thought I'd be easy to take, but you weren't. One of them learned that the hard way. Dalton didn't ask what that meant. He could think well enough. They planned to sell me, she kept going. There are men who pay well for certain things. Women who look like me, who come from where I come from. The words stayed in the air between them, heavy with meanings that made Dalton's hands curl into fists. Not at her, at the world that made such things happen. But they're gone now, he said. The camp was empty. Something scared them. Something in the night. They left everything and ran. She turned her head a bit enough that he could see her side face, including me. Lucky, was it? Her voice held something sour. Or am I just a different kind of stuck now? The question hit between them like a stone dropped in still water. Dalton became suddenly really aware of how small this space was, how their legs were almost touching, how he could feel the heat coming from her body, different from the heat of the sun, deeper, more risky. You think I'm keeping you prisoner? He said. Aren't you? You can leave any time, can I? She moved, turning to face him more straight. The move brought them closer. You follow me. You offer water I need. You point out wounds I have. Every nice thing is another chain. Her face was inches from his now, close enough that he could see the faint marks on her cheek, special marks that held meaning he didn't get, close enough to see the gold bits in her dark eyes, close enough to feel her breath when she spoke. This is different, he said, though his voice came out rougher than he meant. How? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he had too many answers and none of them were things he could say out loud. Like how looking at her made him forget why he'd been walking alone. Like how the way she stood up to him made him want to see how far that strength went. Like how the thought of her walking away into nothing bugged him more than it should. I don't want to own you, he finally said. Then what do you want? The question was a trick. Or maybe it was an honest thing dressed as a trick. Kiona was watching him with a look he couldn't read, waiting for an answer he didn't know how to give. Before he could speak, she moved, pulled back just enough to break the spell of being close. The space between them became easy to breathe again. The sun will be lower in a few hours, she said, voice carefully normal. We can move then. We, she'd said. We! Dalton nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat there in the shade, not touching, but not apart either. The heat pushed down. Time moved slow as honey, and between them, something without a name and not wanted kept growing. The sun was going toward the far line when Dalton saw how much blood she'd lost. Not all at once, just a steady leak that had made the side of her dress dark from ribs to hip. She'd been hiding it well, but when she stood to leave their spot, she swayed and caught herself against the rock. That needs cleaning, he said. It's fine. It's not fine. I can smell it going bad from here. That was a lie, but not much of one. The wound had been open too long and too much heat. If bad stuff set in out here, she'd be dead in days. Kiona turned to look at him. Something in her eyes said she knew it too. Knew she was running out of choices that didn't end bad. I have water and cloth, Dalton said. That's all. Nothing else. Nothing else. She repeated like she was checking the words for tricks. Nothing else, he said yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once, quick and final, turned her back to him and began working at the ties of her dress with fingers that shook a bit. Not from fear, from being weak. Wait, Dalton said. His own hands weren't much steadier as he wet a strip of cloth from his pack. Let me. When he touched the leather ties, his knuckles brushed against her back. She went stiff. He froze. I'm just loosening it, he said quietly. So I can see. She nodded but didn't relax. He worked slowly, carefully pulling the dress away from the wound. It had stuck to dried blood, and when it came free, fresh red came up. The cut ran from her lower ribs down across her hip, deep enough to scar, deep enough to be bad. Who did this? He asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. Kiona looked back over her shoulder. Their faces were close again, but different from before. This being close had reason and okay, which somehow made it more risky. One of the sailors, she finally said. When I fought back, Dalton felt anger go into his bones like cold water. He'd seen wounds like this before, knew what kind of man left marks like that on a woman who said no. Good, he said. Good that you fought back. Something changed in her face. Not quite softness, but maybe the edge of it, like she'd expected blame and got something else instead. He began cleaning the wound. His hands were shaking now, and there was no hiding it. Every time he touched her skin, he felt the shake run through his fingers. Felt the warmth of her, the smoothness of skin that had never known the kind of life he'd lived. "You're shaking," she said. "I know." "Why?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "Because I don't want to hurt you," he said, which was true, but not the whole truth. "Liar!" He stopped, cloth pushed against her ribs. "What? You shake because you want to touch me." She said it like a fact, like pointing out weather. "And you hate that you want it." The words hit like a punch. Dalton couldn't say no, couldn't fight them. She'd seen right through him to something he hadn't wanted to say to himself. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "I know." She was still looking back at him, eyes dark and knowing. That's what makes it worse. They stayed like that, him with his hand against her skin, shaking. Her watching him with a look that held no pity, no anger, just knowing of something neither of them wanted, and both of them felt. "Finish," she finally said, turning away before the light goes. He finished, wrapped the wound with clean cloth, tried not to notice how soft her skin was under his rough hands, tried not to think about the curve of her waist or the way she breathed deeper when his fingers touched certain places. When he was done, she pulled her dress back up without looking at him. "Thank you," she said. It was the first time she'd thanked him for anything. Dalton nodded, not trusting his voice. They left the spot as the sun made the sky red and gold, walked quiet toward a line of low hills far away. The space between them was still 30 steps, but it felt smaller now, like they were tied by something more than just the luck of being in the same empty place together. Behind them, the rocks held the memory of being close and shaking hands. Ahead of them, the night was coming, and with it, something neither of them was ready for. She waited until she thought he was asleep. Dalton heard her get up, heard the whisper of leather against stone as she got what little she had. He kept his breathing even, kept his eyes closed, gave her the chance to leave. But when her footsteps started to go away into the darkness, something in him couldn't let her go. Not like this. Not hurt and alone with nothing but stars to show her way. He was on his feet and moving before he'd made a real choice to follow. She heard him coming. Started to run even with the wound, even in the dark, even when everything said running was a bad idea. Dalton ran too. His legs were longer, his body okay. He caught her before she'd made it 50 yards. His hand closed around her wrist. She spun, and suddenly they were fighting in the dark. All fake of being nice gone. She was stronger than he'd thought, wilder. Her knee came up toward his ribs, but he twisted away. She tried to pull free, but he held on. "Let me go," she said, mad. "You'll die out there. That's my choice, is it? Or are you just running because it's easier than staying?" The words hit something in her. She stopped fighting for a breath, just a single moment of no moving. And in that moment, everything changed. They were standing too close. His hands were on her wrists, holding them gently but strong. Her chest was moving against his. He could feel her heart beating, could feel his own matching the beat. The night air between them felt full like before lightning hits. "Let go," she said again, but her voice had changed, gone quiet, almost a whisper. "No, why not?" He couldn't answer. Didn't know how to explain the feeling that letting her walk away now would be worse than anything that had come before. That somehow, in the space of a single day, she'd become something he couldn't just forget. Kiona was looking up at him, and in the moonlight her eyes held things he didn't have names for. Not just anger now. Something else, something that made breathing hard. "You don't get to keep me safe," she said. "That's not yours to do, I know." "Then why are you still holding me?" Dalton let his grip go loose, but he didn't let go all the way. His hand slid from her wrists to her arms, gentle now instead of holding. She could have pulled away. Should have pulled away. She didn't move because you haven't asked me to stop, he said. The saying hung between them. Risky and true. Kiona's breathing had gone not deep. He could feel the beat in her wrists fast under his fingers. I hate you, she said, but there was no real feel in it. I know, I don't trust you. I know that too. Then what are we doing? It was the same question from earlier, asked in darkness with their bodies too close and all their walls taken away by being tired and heat and something neither wanted to name. I don't know, Dalton said true. Kiona tilted her head, looking at him. Then slowly, on purpose, she lifted one hand and put it against his chest, not pushing him away, just resting there, feeling his heartbeat through the cloth of his shirt. It's fast, she said. Yes, why? You know why? She did. He could see it in her eyes, in the way her fingers curled a bit against him. She knew exactly what she did to him, had probably known since that first moment when he touched her wrists to free them. This is a mistake, she said. Probably. We're from different worlds. I know. If my people found you with me, they'd end you where you stood. Worth the risk. That made her laugh. Sharp and sour, but still a laugh. Her hand was still on his chest. His hands were still on her arms. Neither of them moved. Away. You're a fool, she said. Been called worse by smarter women, I'd guess. Now it was his turn to almost smile. Few as smart as you. Kiona shook her head, but something in her face had gone softer. Not giving up, but maybe knowing that whatever this was between them, it wasn't going away just because they both wanted it to. I should go, she said. You should, but I'm not going to. No. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was so low he almost didn't hear it. Not tonight. Dalton let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Let go of her arms, but didn't step back. She lowered her hand from his chest. Slowly, like it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. They stood there in the moonlight, not touching anymore, but not apart either. The space between them buzzed with everything they weren't saying. Tomorrow, she finally said. I leave tomorrow. All right, I mean it. I believe you. He didn't, and from the look in her eyes, she didn't believe herself either. They walked back to camp side by side, still not touching, still keeping that careful space. But something had changed. Some wall had come down even as others went up. When they lay down to sleep, they were closer than before. Close enough that he could hear her breathing. Close enough that she could hear his. Close enough that neither of them slept much at all. The stars came out like holes punched in black cloth, letting light come through from somewhere else. Dalton sat with his back against a big rock, watching them come one by one. Kiona sat across from him, close enough to talk, far enough to keep the pretend. That space still mattered. Why do you do this? She asked sudden. He didn't pretend not to get it. Do what? Walk alone? Help people who don't want help? Follow women who tell you to leave? Dalton was quiet for a long time. The night pushed in around them, cool and not caring. He'd never told anyone what he was about to tell her. Didn't know why he was telling her now, except that lying felt worse than the truth. I was a soldier once, he said years back. Before the lands opened up, Kiona didn't answer, but he felt her listening get sharper. Felt her hearing in a way that made the words come easier. We got orders to move through Apache land. Move anyone we found. Use force if needed. He stopped, the memory bad in his mouth. It was always needed. The quiet stretched. He couldn't look at her. Couldn't stand to see what might be in her eyes. There was a village, small, mostly women and old ones. The fighters were away hunting. His voice had gone flat, no feeling. The only way he could get through it. My boss said we were making the area safe, making it okay for new people. And were you? Her voice was soft but sharp as a knife. No. The word came out broken. We were clearing it, burning it, taking anything good and breaking the rest. He heard her breathing change. Heard the moment she got what he was really saying. I followed orders, he kept going. Told myself I was just doing my job, that someone else would do it if I didn't. All the things scared people tell themselves when they don't want to see what they've become. How many? She asked. Too many. How many? The question was a must now. She wanted the full heavy of it. Wanted him to carry it in words and not just quiet. 17, he said. 17 people who never fought us, who just wanted to be left alone. The number sat between them like a dead body. Kiona was very still. He took a chance to look at her and found her staring at him with a look he couldn't read. Not hate, not letting go. Something more mixed. That's why you help people now, she said. You think you can make it even? I know I can't. Then why? Because doing nothing is worse. Kiona tilted her head, looking at him in the starlight. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Not softer, but maybe less sharp. You think I'm your way to be saved? No, he met her eyes. I think you're just someone who needed help. And I'm just someone who happened to be there. Liar. But there was no anger in it this time. Almost nice, maybe, he said yes. She stood, then moved around the small fire they'd built. Came to sit beside him instead of across from him. Not touching, but close. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. The village, she said quietly. What happened to the fighters when they came back? Dalton closed his eyes. They found what was left, followed us for 3 days. We lost 4 men before we got away. Good. The word should have hurt. Instead, it felt like letting go. I left after that, he said, ran away. Been walking ever since. Trying to find something worth the living. And have you found it? He looked at her then. Really looked at her. The way the firelight shone in her eyes. The way she sat like she was made from stone and fire both. The way she'd fought him and pushed him and never once made it easy. Maybe, he said. Kiona held his look. Something went between them in that look. Getting it. Maybe, or knowing that they were both hurt in ways that couldn't be fixed, but might be got. I should hate you, she said. You should for what you did, what your people did. Yes, but I don't. She said it like a secret, like something she wished wasn't true. I should, but I don't. Dalton didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if there was anything to say. Kiona leaned against him then, just a bit. Just her shoulder against his. The smallest show of trust he'd ever got, and the biggest gift he'd ever been given. They sat like that under the stars, not talking, not moving, just being in the same space, carrying their own heavy things together. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Tomorrow I still leave, I know. Tonight, though, she didn't finish. Didn't need to. Tonight, they could pretend that different worlds didn't matter, that history didn't matter, that anything was possible if you wanted it bad enough. Tonight, they could be just 2 people under stars that didn't judge. Tomorrow would take care of itself. Morning was still an hour away when Dalton heard the horses far, but coming closer. 3 riders moving fast across open ground. Their speed steady and with reason, not just going hunters. He was on his feet right away. Kiona woke at his move, already reaching for her knife before her eyes fully opened. That's how you stay alive, he thought. Never fully asleep. Never fully safe. Riders, he whispered. Coming from the west. She was up and listening. After a moment, she nodded. I hear them. Your people, maybe. Her face was hard to read in the before-morning dark. Or the men who chained me come back for what they left. Either choice was bad. If it was her people and they found her with him, they'd think the worst. If it was the sellers, they'd try to finish what they started. Both ways ended in fighting. There, Dalton pointed to a bunch of rock 30 yards away. A narrow space in the stone, barely wide enough for 2 people. We can hide there until they go by. They moved fast and quiet. The space was even smaller than it looked, making them push inside sideways. Kiona went first. Dalton followed, and suddenly they were stuck together in dark with barely room to breathe. His chest was against her back. Her body was pushed along the length of his, from shoulder to hip. Every breath she took, he felt. Every little move of her weight sent knowing through him like power. Don't move, he breathed against her ear. She nodded, but the move made her push closer. His arms came up without thinking, on each side of her, hands flat against the stone to keep from touching her more than needed. But needed was already more than he could handle. The riders were closer now. He could hear their voices, rough and saying a talk he didn't get. Kiona went stiff at the sound. The sellers, she whispered, so quiet he almost didn't hear. They were looking, spreading out to look more. One of them was going straight for their hiding place. Dalton's hand moved without thinking, covering Kiona's mouth gently. Not to quiet her, but to keep any sound from coming if she moved. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her head a bit, her cheek brushing against his hand. The rider went by within 10 ft of them. So close Dalton could smell the horse, could hear the sound of leather and the man saying bad words under his breath. They stayed still, barely breathing, pushed together so tight there was no space left between them. Kiona's heart was beating. Dalton could feel it against his chest, fast as a bird's wings. Or maybe that was his own heart. Hard to tell when they were this close. The rider moved on, started to go back, and then Kiona moved, not away from Dalton, toward him. She turned in the narrow space, a move that should have been no way, but somehow wasn't. Now they were face to face, her front pushed against his, her breath hot against his throat. She was looking up at him in the dark. He could barely see her eyes, but he felt the heavy of her look. "Why are you still here?" she whispered, saying her question from before, but the meaning was different now. Not why was he following her? Why was he risking his life for her? "You know why?" he whispered back. Her hand found his chest again, rested there over his heart like she was checking to see if it was still fast. It was. "They'll come back," she said. "I know. If they find us together, they'll try to end both of us." "Let them try." She shook her head. But there was something almost soft in the move. "Fool. You're fool." The words came out before he could stop them. Too much truth, too raw. But Kiona didn't pull away. Didn't make fun. Just kept her hand on his heart and her eyes on his face. "We can't stay here," she said. "Not yet. They're still close. I don't mean the rocks." Her voice went even lower. "I mean this us, whatever this is. I know it doesn't have a future. I know that too. Then why does it feel like it matters?" Dalton didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he had too many answers and none of them made sense. How do you explain that a single day can change everything? That someone you met at morning can be needed by night? Outside, the riders were getting together, fighting about which way to look next. Their voices showed mad. They'd lost the path. "They'll give up soon," Dalton said. "Move on to easier catch." "And then what?" "Then we do what we planned. You go your way, I go mine. Just like that. Just like that." But neither of them moved. Neither of them made space. They stayed pushed together in the darkness, hearing the riders fight and finally choose to go south. Heard as the sound of feet faded. Heard as quiet came back to the desert. Still they didn't move. "We should go," Kiona finally said. "Yes now, yes," but she didn't pull away. And Dalton didn't let go of the stone walls that kept him from holding her right. They stayed in that no-way space between wanting and smart, between what was and what could never be. When they finally came out into the growing light, something had changed. The space between them felt smaller. The must of being apart felt heavier. The sun was coming up, making the sky in shades of red and gold, and neither of them said what they were both thinking, that they were running out of time. They got to the high land at midday. Beyond it, the land went down into places Dalton had never gone. Apache land, her land, where he couldn't follow. Even if she asked, she didn't ask. Kiona stood at the edge, looking out over the big space of deep spots and high spots that went to the far line. Home was out there somewhere. Her people, her life before chains and cellars, and a cowboy who didn't get that helping could be another way of taking. "This is where we split," she said. Dalton stood a few steps back, giving her room. The wind pulled at her hair, carrying it away from her face. He remembered the sight, knew he'd never see anything like it again. "You could come with me," he said, and right away wished he hadn't. She turned, and the look in her eyes was almost feeling sorry. "To where?" "Your world. Where I'd always be the Apache woman you saved? Where every nice thing would be a reminder that I needed saving. It wouldn't be like that. It would always be like that." She moved closer. "You know it would." He did know. Had known from the moment he cut those chains that there was no way of this where they ended up together. Different worlds didn't just mean different places. They meant different futures that couldn't be side by side. "I could follow you." He tried. "Keep my space. Just make sure you get home safe." "And then what? You think my people would welcome you? You think I could face them with a white man following behind me like a shadow?" She shook her head. "That's not freedom, Dalton. That's just a longer chain." The truth of it hit him like a punch. Everything he'd done, every try to help had been about his needs, not hers, his bad feeling, his way to be saved, his want to be the good guy of a story that wasn't his to tell. "You were right," he said quietly. "That first morning, what you said to me, I said a lot of things. You said you'd rather die than be mine." He met her eyes. "You were right, because being mine was never the freedom I thought I was giving you." Kiona's face went softer. She closed the space between them until they were standing as close as they'd been in the hiding place. Close enough that he could see the gold bits in her dark eyes. Close enough to count her breaths. "You're learning," she said. "Too late." "No." She reached up, touched his face with her fingertips. "Right on time." Then she kissed him. It was nothing like he'd thought. Not gentle, not sweet. It was strong and needy and full of all the things they couldn't say. Full of bye and thank you and I wish. Full of what might have been if the world was different, if they were different. When she pulled back, there were no tears, just clear. "This is where I choose," she said. "Not where you let me go. Where I choose to go." The difference mattered. He saw that now. Letting her go meant he'd been holding. Her choosing meant she'd always been free, even when chained. Especially then. "What will you tell your people?" he asked. "The truth. That I was taken. That I freed myself. That a fool of a cowboy helped me live long enough to make it home." A small smile touched her lips. "They'll probably want to track you down and thank you, right? I'll make sure to head the other way." "Smart man." They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to be the first to step away. Then Kiona did what she'd done from the start. Made the hard choice without waiting. She turned and started walking. Didn't look back. Didn't wave. Just walked away into her world while he stayed in his. Dalton watched until she went away into the deep spots. Watched until there was nothing left to see but heat wave and empty sky. Then he turned and started walking the other way. He'd come out here looking for being saved. Found something better instead. Getting it. She'd taught him that freedom wasn't something you gave. It was something you saw someone already had. That helping meant respecting their right to say no to your help. That the best kind of love was letting go all the way. The chains he'd cut that morning had been metal. Easy to break. The chains he'd cut today were his own. Harder to see, harder to say, but just as needed to break. Dalton walked alone into the afternoon sun. The desert went on forever in all ways. Somewhere behind him, Kiona was finding her way home. Somewhere ahead, he'd find his own path. They'd never see each other again. Both of them knew it, and that was exactly as it should be. If you like this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another great tale from the wild land, where choices and what happens after hit in ways you never thought. Don't forget to sign up and think about a super chat to help us keep giving you more stories like these. Your help means everything.